I'm Ashton Addison from the Crypto Coin Show, and today on Blockchain Interviews, we have Geoff McCabe, CEO and founder of LightningWorks, here to talk about comics, manga, tech, blockchain, how it all fits together. Geoff, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Hi, yeah, I'm in Manila in the Philippines right now, and been doing some cosplay work and doing some interviews, meeting some KOLs for investors, all kinds of stuff while I'm here, and then I'll be back to Dubai. I'm on the road again, hopefully going to Consensus. We just did ComicCon in Costa Rica, which I missed. It's only once a year, but yeah, we have a lot going on.
Very cool. And yeah, you look like you're in a comic book right now. I'm excited
Yeah,
to
I'm
hear.
jealous. My whole team is getting to have fun dressing up and running on Comic Con, and here I am by myself.
It's okay. We're all connected through the blockchain. And I'm excited to hear how your team is incorporating blockchain with comics and manga, which have been around for so long. And there's so many dedicated fans. And you know they're wild for it, and I've seen the costumes at Comic-Con, so I can imagine when the blockchain enthusiasts come along and these things tie together, it's going to be crazy. I would love to hear just a little bit on your background and what got you so interested in this merge of comics and blockchain.
You know, I started with Bitcoin in 2013, 2014. I started full-time in 2017. I was the founder of Divi, which became a top 65 coin. So I have a lot of experience in the crypto space, and I've been working 100-hour weeks since 2017. But one of the things that was frustrating for me was just that, you know, the governments weren't and the banks weren't allowing Bitcoin to be used the way it was designed to be used. And I wanted, like many people, to find a practical use for blockchain. And when Marvel and DC in 2018 or so started talking about not printing comics anymore, so there would be no more collecting, which I did as a kid, and I still have my collection. And it was very, you know, people were freaked out in the comic book world about this. And so I saw this opportunity with blockchain and making them digital. And so I started working on it even back in 2018. At the time, the lead developer of Namecoin, which created the first NFT ever, was on our team of Divi. And so we talked a lot about NFT. This is before CryptoKitties. So we talked a lot about NFTs before any of that. Then when CryptoKitties came out, we really realized the potential. And I thought people would jump on comics right away because to me, it's so obvious that this is a great use case. I mean, it solves so many problems with the printing of paper, the distribution of paper, trying to get into so many different languages around the world. You know, there's more than 200 languages, but even Marvel only prints in about 10 to 12 languages. And it's like, here's blockchain. It's perfect for that. It's a real use case, something people actually want, right? People want comics. They like stories. They love characters. So I thought everybody would jump on this. And now, fast forward, 6-7 years, and still almost nobody's doing it. And when I talk to people about it and investors, it's very hard to get them to sort of see it. Like people just don't. It's weird. They accept like JPEGs being worth millions of dollars, but comics, no, they don't get it. And so it's a little frustrating. I call it the curse of the visionary. You know, when you feel like you have this brain with all this stuff you've been thinking about, and it all makes perfect sense to you and our team, but then you sit down with somebody else and you only have a few seconds to get their attention. You know, it's to get them to understand it. And we see, you know, some people right away are like, oh, this is going to be incredible, you know, because comics are huge. Manga is huge. Like people have no idea how big they are. The total IP value of all this intellectual property is over $1 trillion that comes from different forms of cartoons. I mean, just things like CryptoKitty or Winnie the Pooh alone are worth as much as the entire NFL, like all the teams put together. I mean, this is how big these things are. They're gigantic. And all that's just there. So the blockchain is just waiting, you know, for this to happen. And so we've been building this technology for years and are now, at least I think it would take anybody 2 years to catch up with us as far as all the stuff that we've built. I mean, just the tech stack is insane. Like how many different pieces of technology are really needed to make this viable so that it's not just for blockchain nerds, but is available to everybody. And we've already launched 4 or 5 comics, and each time we do it, we kind of tear apart our system and rebuild it even better. So we've been iterating and iterating and iterating. You know, Netflix did the same thing, right? It took them a while to figure out what their business model was going to be. And so we've been kind of going through the same sort of process of launching something, evaluating it, and getting it better and better so it's more fun, more addicting. Because we don't want to just take paper and put it in digital and think people are going to care about it. Digital, and specifically Web3, has its own particular things that make it cool, and you need to leverage all of these ideas so that it feels authentic for the technology and for the experience. And so because nobody's done this before, we're having to reinvent so many different aspects of what collecting looks like. And in general, like NFTs, one of the reasons it died is that there's no actual collecting experience. There's a speculation experience. You know, you buy them, you have some fun maybe when you first buy it, if you don't know what, say, tier and how rare it's going to be. But once you own it, you can't play with it. And normally in a product, you play with that product, especially a collectible. Like even with, like, I used to collect baseball cards. I collected anything, right? I love to collect stuff. And when you have, whether it's comics or baseball cards, you play with them, right? And that play may be just putting them out on the table and organizing them. With, you know, with football cards, I would organize them by team. I would organize them in different ways, and that's a form of play, right? One of the people on our team is Ken Abrams. He was the head of licensing merchandise and toys for Marvel for 3 years, and he explained to me about play patterns. And so every product has a play pattern, right, of how you interact with it, what makes it fun. And with something like digital collectibles, NFTs really miss the boat. And then you get this thing, and then you never really use it again. You can sell it. It's fun. The play pattern is watching the chart go up, but as soon as the chart is going down, the play pattern is not very fun anymore, and you lose interest, right? Because there's nothing you can really do with it. Now, NFTs with games makes a lot of sense, right? We all know that's going to be big, but the gaming influencers really came out strongly against them because they knew, and I think they're correct, that the studios would find ways to use this technology for evil by making it a way to suck more money out of the users, right? And so they came out against it. So that hasn't become very viable either, not yet. And so comics is there waiting to happen. And so we've been building all of this. And what's interesting to me is that manga has a completely different business model than comics. Manga is not collectible, but it comes faster. It's black and white. You get it very cheaply. You get a fixed book this big for $10 in Japan of hundreds of stories sometimes. With comics, you get a thing this thin. You pay far more per page, and you have to wait a long time. You wait a whole month before the story comes to you again. And so by then you've lost all your emotional connection to the story. So manga is much more emotional, and that's really important. And so we basically looked at all the best features of manga, the best features of comics, and then Korean webtoons is the big thing right now. Webtoons is bigger than both DC and Marvel put together as far as how much the sales is of their content. I mean, Marvel's movie franchises is in the tens of billions of dollars, right? That's where they make that's where Disney makes all the money from the IP. But Webtoons is catching up. They're starting to get Netflix shows and all this kind of stuff. And Webtoons is a situation where anybody can create it. With American comics, there were only about 200 independent creators that were printing comics and trying to sell them. With Webtoons, there's now over 1 million people. Wow. And that happened because they use technology in new ways. They made it all accessible. Anybody can draw a comic. What we're seeing happening is all these new AI tools are going to come in that help you write. They help you create the comics in different ways. They help artists go faster. But the part that's missing is the go-to-market part. And with Webtoons, nobody makes money unless you're in the top tiny fraction of 1%. It doesn't solve the real problem. The real problem is that millions and millions of people have these stories inside them. They want to tell these stories, and they want to make money from it, so they don't have to work a 9-to-5 job. That's the problem that needs to be solved. Web3 and the technology we built around LightningWorks is specific to solve that particular problem. We don't care how you make your comic, whether it's hand-drawn or made with an AI or made with a big global team. We want to be the part that helps you take it to market by using the blockchain. So you put it on a chain and you can actually sell it. And we've made it so you can mint this stuff, and it just goes right into a wallet that's built into chat apps. So from your chat app, which you already have, whether it's WhatsApp or Telegram or Signal, we can do it in Discord too. From there, you can distribute it. So we'll give you tools to be able to sell it, or you can just give them away. When I was a kid, I would make stuff and sell it to all my family. I would go to like Thanksgiving, and everybody would buy something. I'd make $50, you know. That's a lot of money to a kid. And kids are going to be able to make their own comics very soon and be able to sell them to their friends at school. They can do it for bake sales. There's this whole world that's just sort of waiting to happen. And so we've built this crazy tech stack for all of this stuff. For me, it's so obvious. Like, this is going to be a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar thing.
No, that's
because
incredible.
It solves so many problems.
It's incredible, Geoff. I was just going to say, there's so many ways, there's so many faucets to this because it's been around for so long, and I feel like it's very ripe for disruption. As you're saying, there's so much functionality you can add in when you put blockchain in there. I feel like that democratization of access to create the comics is a huge thing because, you know, before it would be so tough. As you said, there's barely any distributors, and only even then the 1% are making capital. I feel like NFTs and just tokenization in general really leveled the playing field for that. It's just about having that go-to-market strategy, or like, hey, where can I actually put this where people that are interested in comics, not just my friends and family or people who I can reach down the street, I want everybody in the world who's interested in comics to be able to access these and potentially buy them directly without middlemen as well.
Well, yeah, so what they've proved in Japan is that when you make comics accessible and inexpensive, there's a market for everybody. They have comics, they have manga. I mean, manga is just a Japanese word for comics, right? So we can just call them comics. But manga comes in every type of variety. They have stuff for kids. They have stuff for old people. They even have comics, manga, that are just about fishing stories, which sounds silly. But if you think about it, you know, fishing is actually really, there's a lot of anticipation and building up all the emotion behind wanting to catch this fish and going out and fishing with your father, all these kind of stories. I can imagine as a storyteller, I can imagine why this could be really, really fun and exciting for people to read these stories, especially if you love fishing. So they've basically shown that there's a type of story for everybody. And so the market is gigantic there. In the US, it's just mostly around a few genres like sci-fi or a lot of superheroes, right? Both Marvel and DC made superheroes, people wearing spandex, colorful costumes, a big thing. And it became part of our culture. But in Japan, they have a culture of many different types of stories. They have a lot of romance and coming of age stories, all of this. And so when I talk about comics, I'm actually, if you look behind me, you can see here, we're doing stories. They're not superhero stories. We kind of bring the heroes more down to earth. We don't have people that are like Superman that are super powerful generally. We have more like human beings that are based on famous heroes around the world. We have a bunch of aliens, all kinds of stuff like this. And one of the things I learned studying comics, people tend to like a character like Batman even more than a Superman, because they're more relatable, because they're closer to our skill set. And you worry about them more. You just don't worry that much about Superman. Unless someone's busting out the kryptonite, the stories kind of get old, right? So with Batman, anything can happen, and he has to be more clever about how he wins. And so there's just more interesting storytelling. And so I tended to focus on that with our stories. But yeah, I think that, you know, the market is gigantic. And so people often don't understand that how big this market is. And the technology we were building can work for, it can work for short movies, it can work for books, it can work for NFTs, all of this. There's many different ways to tell a story. It can be comic strips, it can be done page by page, like a page a day, a strip a day. I mean, there's, like webtoons, the stories come every day with a lot of the artists, and so people are constantly checking in every day with the characters that they're following their following their story. People like that. You don't lose that emotional connection. So bringing all this new technology and new ideas of what's working for webtoons together with the collectability of Marvel and DC comics, the fast delivery and the emotions and the variety of manga, and then layering on all these great things that we all love about crypto and Web3, then putting it on a package that makes it really easy so people can just read these things right in chat apps they already have. You don't need to download a LightningWorks app. And everything's very expensive. Or very inexpensive. We want to make it very inexpensive. It's like the opposite for us is like Bored Apes. It's too expensive. You can't participate in that. We want to make it, we were even talking about making all of it free because all the value is really in the IP. You know, you want to, for every $1 that Marvel sells in comics, they're making 20 in movies, merchandise, toys. I just made up that number 20, but it's 20 or 50, right? Actually, I think they lose money on the comics and they make all the money from the IP. So when you think about Web3 and printing an NFT comic on a chain like CoreDAO or one of the new super fast ones like Waterfall that's coming, we're talking about less than a penny to mint one. So why not give out 1 million copies if you can? And so you get a lot of people paying attention to your IP, then your IP is worth a lot of money. We've learned this in Web3 about meme coins, right? If you get 1 million people that own your coin, it's going to be $1 billion market cap. It doesn't matter if it has a use case or not. The fame alone is worth more than any use case. I mean, Bitcoin, after all, is just a meme coin that's very successful. We've convinced people that it's digital gold. It's not gold, and it has actually no value based on all the electricity spent to create it, right? It's worth what it's worth because we all agree that it is, and we feel like there's this need for a digital gold. And so to me, it's really just a meme coin, and there's no difference between Bitcoin fundamentally and a cartoon character. Once 1 million people like your cartoon character, if it's made them laugh or it's made them cry or it's made them afraid, they have some emotional connection to it, it's always going to be worth a lot of money forever. I mean, all these cartoons that are decades old are worth money because they're vintage now, and they come back, right? So fame is worth a lot of money, and that's where comics and characters come in because their brightness, their exaggerated characteristics of the antics they're doing on screen or on the pages of a story. If they connect with us emotionally, then they're always going to be worth something. And unlike something like an NFT, which doesn't really, when I say NFT, I'm talking about the Bored Apes and collectible JPEGs. There's no story there, right? And after the fact, they're trying to create stories, but when you start a story correctly, you already know years in advance what's going to happen. You know the character's backstory, the backstories of all the people, the side aspects of the story. And as the story unfolds, people get surprised and delighted by this. And you take people on a journey, it's going to make people very, very interested long-term in what you've produced. And so we've taken a very long time to do this, and we're now starting to roll out these comics. We have more than 25 comics in production in the art stage and another 20 or so scripts. So starting very soon, we're going to be rolling out our #1 issue of Seige Worlds, which is actually a triple-length comic of more than 60 pages. Then we're going to have Starblind #1, which is, I think, going to be 45, 50 pages. So these are hefty comics, almost a graphic novel. So people can really get into the story, learn something about the characters, and start anticipating the next issues that are coming after that. Once you get into 10 or more comics, then you really have a story. Then you have a long-term commitment with people, and then you have a lot of value. And NFTs don't do that. Again, when I say NFTs, I think of NFTs differently, but people use the word NFTs to mean collectible JPEGs, right? They don't have any of that, and it's unfortunate, and it's part of the reason why it crashed. The whole thing crashed, and people all moved to meme coins to chase the next, money-making speculative asset.
Definitely, yeah. No, it's. I think storytelling is super important. It's been important for centuries and thousands of years, and being able to put it in
stories.
Yeah, being able to put it in a transferable way it provides a lot more meaning behind. I feel like there can be a role for NFTs of the hero of the story or some other collectibles, but you really need, if you want to go deeper than that, you want to actually have more meaning. You need to have the story or the comic that's behind it as well. I feel like
people don't understand the importance of stories. My mother is a Pulitzer-nominated poet, and she told me about stories at a very young age. She said, Geoff, before television, we used to sit around the table, and your value in a social setting had a lot to do with how good of a storyteller you were. And he said, and your grandfather, your great-grandfather, your great-great-grandfather were master storytellers. They would have the whole room spellbound with these great stories. And she would tell me these stories about my great-grandfather being chased by a shark and finding treasure in pirate treasure in Mexico, and all these stories, And so I was from a very young age, I always understood that stories are very important. And when I thought about it biologically, basically stories are what set human beings apart from every other species. It's this ability to be able to communicate with each other with words, to tell other people, like, oh, don't go over there. There's a lion over there, or over there is the great food, or some herbs, or if you find the herb with these kind of shaped leaves that are purple in the center, you're going to be able to use that for healing. Our ability to communicate in that way, rather than with verbally, is storytelling, and it's what made us so successful in the dominant species on this planet. That means that our brains are uniquely designed to absorb and tell stories. So when you're writing stories, you're connecting with people in a very primitive way that people respond to biologically with the lizard parts of their brain, in the same way we respond biologically to the color red. It's very exciting. It's the color of warning, right? Or we respond to fire. Fire is also something that's dangerous and exciting and very valuable. We spent millions of years as very primitive people, and we've only been civilized for a tiny fraction. So much of our brains are based on this stuff that was a very long time ago, and good storytelling taps into all of that.
Definitely.
And one of the things I like to tell people is, like, learn about stories and you will improve so many aspects of your life.
No, I completely agree. I'd love to hear a little glimpse of, the sort of the story behind Seige Worlds, the head title of the game and the comics from LightningWorks.
Yeah, so I knew that it would be very difficult to get people to take interest in new characters, right? We've watched hundreds of people, over the years, try to create comic books and get people to be interested in their characters. And it's very difficult to sort of reach critical mass of readers. And so I thought of a hack, basically. I thought, what? Instead of starting with completely new characters and trying to get people interested, let's start with characters that they already maybe have some familiarity with. So the idea was basically to start out as a video game, actually, before the comic. And the idea was to take famous heroes from Earth's history, from different cultures, global market, tapping into global markets, right? So we have character from, we have a character from India, we have a character from Japan, multiple characters from Japan. We have China, Indonesia, United States. We have a character based roughly on Joan of Arc from France. And we have characters from Africa. So basically all markets, we basically created a character. And some of them we took directly from their history. Like we have a gladiator named Flama. Everything that's known about Flama in the real world is known from just what's written on his tombstone. And he's one of the top, but it's so impressive. He's one of the top 3 most famous gladiators globally, even 2,000 years later. And so we took him exactly. But the other characters are we kind of cherry picked some of the coolest aspects of the particular character. Such as Miyamoto Musashi, who's Japan's most famous samurai and sword fighter. We have our own character that's roughly based on him. We took some of the best parts of his character, renamed him with his different first name but same last name. So people that love that character can feel connected to him, but at the same time, they don't actually know his exact history or his exact character arc. So they feel like they know him, but they can still have the thrill of seeing what actually happened to our version. and we don't have to get into like, conflict with historians saying, well, that's not actually what happened, this kind of stuff. It's sort of uninteresting. We get to be creative, right? But at the same time, it's a hack because people feel like they already know these characters and they have a character that maybe appeals to them because it's somebody that they appreciate from their history. They already have this emotional connection to that character. So people are very excited about it, and not everybody necessarily loves the character from their own culture. All the characters are different. Like if you look right behind me, right here, this right here is Shi Yang. Wait, where is she? Right there. Mm-hmm. So Shi Yang, she's a famous pirate from Chinese history, and she's known as Qing Shi or other names in China, but basically we took her birth name that is not well known. We made a different version of her and told a slightly different story about her. So people aren't going to know what's going to happen to her. And basically we took all these great characters they're all warriors from history, and we put them together where the last thing they remember is dying. They died on Earth, and now they're waking up somewhere. And they don't know where they are, but they find very quickly that all these monsters that are kind of like different sized orcs and other kinds of monsters and villains start attacking them, and they kill them. And then it's like Groundhog Day where they wake up again. So it's perfect for a video game. So their goal is to try to figure out what the hell is going on, and do they have any possibility of escape? They all come from different cultures, but they all speak the same language, and they're going to find that they can start accumulating better and better weapons. So it's basically like they're stuck. You could think of them being stuck in a video game, but there is a bigger mystery behind that as a reader, people are going to understand. And of course, at the end, the big story is, do they escape? Do they get control of the situation? Or are they stuck in sort of this hell forever? And part of the fun for me is writing how they interact with each other based on a couple of things. One is their history and their culture of where they came from. And second is the fact is the last thing they remember is dying. So for example, the character that's based roughly on Joan of Arc, she was burned at the stake. And so when she wakes up, the last thing she remembers is dying in a very painful way. And so she's freaked out by it. Mm-hmm. We have another character named Bonnie Oakland, who's roughly based on Annie Oakley, who's an Old West sharpshooter in the circus. In the story, she actually never was in a real fight. She was just a circus sharpshooter and an acrobat. So she's stuck in the situation where she's dying time after time, and she is, because of trauma that she experienced as a child, she's a pacifist and she doesn't want to fight, and she's completely terrified as well. So all these characters have different story arcs of what's going to happen to them, making alliances with each other and trying to figure out what's happening. And so it's the story. I think the story is really good. I've showed it to a few people that love comics, and they think the story is fantastic. Just the first issue, looking at the first 60 pages, right? And of course, this is going to go for years. I mean, we're taking an approach like manga, where the stories go on and on and on. And we set up the story universe so that it can go for a long time. So because of the world that they're stuck in, and we're thinking very long term, like what's going to happen a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, so that we know where it's going, we know what's going to happen, and we're always constantly having flashbacks to the childhoods and death sequences on Earth of these different characters. So it's a tremendous amount of fun. I'm very inspired by the show Lost. So we're doing a lot of things like the show Lost, as far as how we're telling the story and sort of allowing the reader to piece together what's going on with the different characters, who's good, who's bad, and not really being clear on their motivations in the beginning. And so it should be a lot of fun for people to solve many different mysteries that happen as the story progresses. And we have a video game. And you can actually go and play it online, where you can play these characters. And we'll be building that and adding new content along with the game, with the comic. So what's going to happen is that there's going to be things like, with the technology we built for the comics, you'll find there'll be like a comic where there's an Easter egg, and if you find the key in the comic, you click it, and it drops that key into your wallet as an NFT. It actually will mint that key right there in the comic, drop it into your wallet. Then when you play the game, you'll have that key in the game, and you can open up a door in the game. And we can do things like, we could say that only the first 100 people get the key. So if you want to get into this section of the game, you're going to need one of those 100 keys, which creates an aftermarket for it and an aftermarket for the comic itself. Our comics are built with HTML5, not like JPEGs, like the other people that have attempted comics have attempted to do by making a sequence of JPEGs. They're HTML5, so we can have all kinds of activity, our interactivity, sound, movement. You know, the first comics we're doing are animated actually, and so it's a completely different, new type of. Really, it's very much a new type of entertainment we're creating, which for us creates a tremendous challenge, because I've explained it to our team in terms of like, it's very much like Uber or Airbnb. When Uber came out, they were solving a problem, which was that people had cars that they wanted to find a way to make money from. They're just sitting there most of the day. Or they had extra time and they could, how can I make money out of this asset I have all this money in? Other people want transportation, and taxis suck. And they don't want to ride a bus, and they don't want to be stuck in traffic. They could be working, right? So there's this problem waiting to be solved. Anybody could see it, but nobody had thought to do this before. So investors often will look at this kind of thing and be like, oh, well, you need to prove market fit. Like, you want to, how do you know people want to, you know, they come up with a lot of objections. How do you know people want to ride cars that other people are driving? Like, what, you can think of a lot of problems with this, right? So investors are, in the beginning, are very concerned, you know, that this might not work, and they would probably wanted Uber to prove that this would work first. So we're in that kind of situation right now where people are, the solution is there. There's people that want to write stories. There's people that want to buy stories. We know people want stories digitally because 70% of manga has already gone digital in Japan. So we know people like the digital medium. Nobody's collecting digital manga, but we know people like to collect comics on paper. But there's no market fit because nobody's ever done this before. So when I go into these meetings with investors, they're like, well, you know, come back to me when you can show us all this traction. Yeah, and we've sold a few thousand here, we've sold a few thousand there, and we keep getting better at it. But right now we're kind of looking for like angel investors that see the potential. We're so far ahead with our technology that if we just start getting the traction and get it, and when we get it figured out, you know, we can jump up to $1 billion company, I think, within a matter of years once you sort of crack it, right? Because it's there, right? All this technology is there now, and the market is there. It just hasn't been proven. And so, and it's the same thing with Airbnb. I mean, sleeping in people's houses, renting their houses instead of a hotel, like, that's weird. It would seem weird at the time, like, who would want to do that? All these kind of problems, right? But these things become multi-billion-dollar things once they get started. So we're at that point right now where we're just getting into the launch. We keep iterating in the marketplace, the delivery method. You know, do we do animation? Do we not? Do people care? Like, I just showed Seige Worlds #1 to a few friends that love comics and collect it, and we put some sounds in there. Like, there's a sound in the beginning of a siren of an ambulance, and there's another sound of like water at the beach and the scene. And I looked at the comic and I was like, this is freaking annoying. Like, I don't like these sounds. I found it very distracting, you know. But the friends I was showing to are like, oh, they specifically mentioned I love the sounds. And I didn't even ask them to their opinion. I just sort of assumed it would annoy them because it annoyed me, right? So we don't really know what people want yet. They both thought it was really cool and had a lot of suggestions for sounds. And I'm thinking, okay, well, we're going to have to do more sound, but we'll make a little button for people like me that can just click it. And all the sound goes away if you don't want that. So, you know, we keep learning, we keep iterating, and getting farther and farther ahead, basically, of potential competition. And long term, I really love the stories. I love to tell the stories on this. We're building the technology. I'm very committed with our stories, with our characters, to be like manga storytellers, where I'm going to be telling stories for the rest of my life, and I'm going to take them to the grave with me, you know, or pass them on to my daughters or somebody, you know. It's like, I would never do like what Marvel did and selling these stories out to Disney to then ruin them, you know, like they're doing right now. And I would never do that. Right. But the technology itself, you know, if Warner Brothers or Disney comes in and says, we want to buy this technology and make it into a global phenomenon, I might consider doing that. Right. So for the technology, I'm not, you know, I'm building a real company here that like, but the stories is something that is really dear to me, and I want to be in charge of that stuff and have a great team of co-writers.
Yeah, no, I agree, Geoff. And I feel like the decentralized part in the community, it's so much easier for the comic community to get together when they're doing it through Web3, and not just communicating, but like the interacting of the buying and selling, the marketplace, to be able to like, hey, I'm only missing this one piece of my comic collection. You're missing one piece. We can just trade digitally over the decentralized marketplace, or it's easy to fit. It's much easier than going to garage sales looking for that one missing baseball card that you're missing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the thing is, you mentioned a very important thing there. The easier. You have to ask yourself, is easier better? Because it's actually part of the fun. It's part of the play pattern of going to the comic shop and looking through all the back issues and trying to find that thing, and then discovering other cool things. So how do we replicate that in NFTs when everything is just digital? You click a button and you get exactly what you want instantly. Yeah. Like, how do we put back the play into the collecting? So that's something that that I'm laying in bed at night thinking about, and we're coming up with really cool ways to improve the actual collecting process in a way that makes it fun. But again, we don't want to force people to have to sort through comics digitally, because that's what you have to do in real life. We want to think about what's cool about Web3 and digital that makes sense for this new medium, that makes that fun, rather than trying to sort of put forced work into it, which people won't respond to because it's not authentic. The new play patterns have to be authentic for the new digital Web3 world, and so that's what we're working on, and we have a lot of work to do there. But I think, Phil, if you start from the philosophy of it and from human biology and really understand what you're doing, then as these ideas come to you, then you kind of can understand, oh, that would be really fun. We have to try and see what happens. And we already found that what we're doing is really addictive. Alien Worlds, which is the top play to earn game in the world, as far as I know, they hired us to do a comic book for them. And when we did a release of what we call Starblind Zero, it's basically a test, but we found that the average person bought 30 of the same comic. Why would somebody buy 30 of the same comic, right? It wasn't to speculate, it was to do forging. So we invented this process called forging, where you basically unwrap your comic. We call it unpackaged. So you just basically see it in a sort of a plastic cover. You take it out. This is part of the play pattern, right? Then you see what tier you get. You have 5 tiers from common to legendary. And if you don't like the tier you have, then you can forge 2 of them. So you can take 2 comics and you basically burn them. And you basically burn the higher mint number and you keep the lower mint number. But it recreates the comic with a new cover. Every cover is unique, and a new tier. And the tier is guaranteed to be higher, and it can be up to 5 higher. So while we have 5 initial tiers, we have 4 more special tiers that are higher than that go all the way up to apocalyptic. So there's 9 tiers. And we found the process was insanely addicting. I mean, people love it, and they were buying blocks of 10 or 20 to do this. So we can sell comics for $1, and people, the more addicting we make the process, we think people might buy hundreds, right? I used to love to buy magic cards. A pack of magic cards had 15, and I would buy hundreds of magic cards at a time. I would buy 10 packs, 20 packs, and unwrapping them all, and then sorting and playing with them, and then this kind of thing. Then you add on this digital stuff where you're able to interact with them in different ways or swap them with people very quickly. There's this whole play. There's so much opportunity for new types of play patterns, and so that's what we're basically building. And we know already it's really addicting, and it's going to get far more fun and addicting based on what we've learned from the last launch. People are going to see the next one's going to be insanely addicting, and everyone says it. I don't know. Did I send you some? I think I sent you one. I said I would send you some more so you can kind of get a few of them and see what it's like. But you'll see it's really quite fun, and it will be much better in the next iterations.
No, I love that there's a reinvention of the play patterns, and yeah, it's not going to be sorting through the comic book and finding other cool stuff, but there's so many new ways now that, like opening digital packs, different rarities, and things that can happen digitally that I think people are going to be excited to explore. Now, we don't have a lot of time, Geoff, but I want to bring a call to action on what is the best way for people to get involved with what exactly LightningWorks has out right now and follow along with the releases to make sure that they get the potential early access to the
new so everybody, we're giving out a free comic right now, and it's our first release, and I think the first true NFT comic. So we're giving it away for free. You can get one for free. If people want to buy more, they're $3. We would love to get support. If you love NFTs, if you love Web3, if you love crypto, if you just like our company, please support us. It's $3, right? And we're giving one for free so you can see it. And we'd love to have you join our Telegram, our Discord, and pay attention. We're going to have lots of stories, and I promise you the stories are really good. I mean, people love the stories that they're seeing. The art is fantastic. We have people from Marvel, from DC. We have executives from Disney, from Cirque du Soleil that are helping us with all of this. People are very excited about what we're doing, and we know this. I know this can be really successful. And the other thing is about the people often don't understand. A lot of these projects, people are asking themselves, like, is this going to be a rug pull, or are the people just going to run out of money? Like, people ask me, well, what happens if you run out of money? What I can promise you is I'm never going to run out of money, because I have other businesses. I own a top 20 global yoga retreat center and wellness center in Costa Rica that I make money from. So I will never run out of money. Like, all the money I make beyond paying for food and my kids and stuff, is going to be going into this. So there's I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life, because I'm more passionate about this than anything. And so I will make sure that this is successful. We're going to be having these interviews for the next 20 years. And as we talk about how this grows. So this is something that people don't have to worry about. I'm never going to get bored of it. I mean, how can I get bored of this? It's all it's colors, it's stories, it's characters. It's super fun, right? This is not just my job. This is my hobby. So it's just a matter of time. This is very iterative, and there's a network effect, a self-fulfilling network effect. The farther you go into the stories, the longer the characters exist, the more fans you get, and the more compelling they get, because there's an actual story. It's not just a single issue, but it's a lot of stories that are happening to them. And we're going to be very focused on getting these made into movies, into Netflix shows, and all this. That's what it's really for, right? That's how you're successful in this space. You tell great stories. The comic books act as a way of showing the people at Netflix and at Disney like the story in a way that they can see the art style, they can see the colors, they get a sense of the characters. And we're going to be adding sound and animation so people can really get the vibe. Imagine you're an executive who's in charge of choosing stories at Netflix, right? One guy comes into your office and they put down in front of you, a white paper, with a bunch of black letters. Now you got to imagine what this thing is going to look like. In our case, it's like a comic with sound and music, and it's moving, and there's already cosplay characters running around. Oh, there's already this world that they can tap into. It's so much easier for them to greenlight, as long as the story's not crap, which they're not. It's so much easier for them to greenlight this kind of thing when it's already existing, and it's just easier. They don't have to be so imaginative, right? I don't have to sit there and try to say, imagine this. You see them in the movies, like how they're trying to convince these studio executives to greenlight their thing, and it's in your head as a storyteller, but it's not in theirs. And they just throw you out of their office, 99% of the time, because they don't see what you see. With what we're developing, it's designed specifically in a cinematic way to be able to get these things made into stories. And I have lots of connections in Hollywood and in the movie making industry for this. So that I'm sure is going to happen, because I know the stories are good and the character is good, because it's written for that purpose in the first place. So
incredible.
So once that happens, then you start getting lots of attention, and people are going to go back to all these back issues and want them, and they're scarce, and they're getting more scarce all the time because people are forging them. The supply is going to go down and down and down. With the one we did for Alien Worlds, we sold around 2,000 in the first week or two, and 1,000 of them have already been forged by just a handful of people doing it. I mean, half the supply disappeared. Imagine when there's, when we're doing, say, 100,000 in a mint, but we have a few thousand people buying it, the supply is just going to disappear. There'll be a few hundred left, which normally, most kind of collectibles is what makes them very valuable. I'm not supposed to be talking about, predicting future value of an NFT or it makes a security, but when I'm just talking about math here, so which I'm allowed to do.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, that's really exciting, Geoff. I'm looking forward to seeing. We're so early on that this could be something that goes on for a long time, and I can see that you're so passionate about it. I'm excited to watch it grow. I did get the free comic that you sent. I can share a link to that in the show notes for the viewers to check out the comic.
Yeah.
They can support. I'll also put the social channels in there so people can join the communities, check out the games and the upcoming launches and everything that's going on with LightningWorks. And I really do appreciate you taking the time.
I haven't told you this yet, but we have an ambassador program built in, so you can go to the wallet where you got the comic, type in the letters QR. It's going to produce for you a custom QR code. If you post that, then anybody that's listening to this that buys something in the future, you're going to get paid, or you're going to get free airdrops. We haven't figured out exactly what it is, but rather than sharing our link, share your own link, and then you can kind of track. We don't have a system for you to track it yet, but it's all being data. It's all the data is there. So eventually you'll be able to type in and see how many people have used your particular link, how many people have bought. And so we have this we call it a heroes program, and it's all built right into the chat apps. So it's quite cool. And so we'd love for you to be one of our sort of first people that's using it and then helping us test the system.
Sounds great, Geoff. I can definitely do that too.